I can't be the only one that's fascinated with the NFC North as a division heading into the 2019 NFL season. You have the Detroit Lions, who made major upgrades this offseason, the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers and a new head coach, and of course the Chicago Bears, who made the playoffs last season and look to be a very promising team this season. But what about the team that was the clear-cut favorite going into the 2018 season? What about the team that made the NFC Championship in 2017 with Case Keenum at quarterback, the Minnesota Vikings? It wasn't too long ago when we were thinking the Minnesota Vikings were possibly going to win a Super Bowl. So what exactly happened? And this makes me believe that the Minnesota Vikings are a team that are going to be a true X factor in the 2019 season. They could possibly win the NFC North. They could possibly go to the playoffs, dominate. They have a ton of talent to do so, but they could, on the other hand, I look some days and I say, hey, the Minnesota Vikings, they could also not be very good. A lot of things could go wrong. We could see the offensive line play poorly like last season. The defense regressed last year. Maybe it regresses even more this year. And can Kirk Cousins really hold up as their starting quarterback? A lot of questions have to be asked to the Minnesota Vikings, and a lot of answers need to be given for me to really believe in the Minnesota Vikings as a team, which makes me say the Minnesota Vikings are the X Factor team going into the 2019 season. And for my reasoning, Gronk spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this. Are the Vikings the X Factor team of 2019, or do you believe it's a different team in the NFL? Comment your opinion below. Offensively, the Minnesota Vikings in 2018 looked like a promising unit. Kirk Cousins coming from Washington to Minnesota, a guy that's put up statistics year after year after year, and had a promising season in 2018 with the Minnesota Vikings from a pure numbers standpoint. Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, a great duo of wide receivers. Dalvin Cook, a young promising running back. Kyle Rudolph, a proven NFL tight end. But for whatever reason, the Vikings offense wasn't able to be consistent. It wasn't able to be a unit that was scary, a unit that didn't live up to expectations in 2019. But what has changed for me to say that the Vikings can be better? For me to say that the Vikings are going to be a better offense in 2019. Let's start off with their biggest deficiency from the 2018 season, and that was their offensive line. Their offensive line was truly atrocious last season. It was one of the worst in the NFL. It was horrendous. So what has happened? Well, they brought in Josh Klein, who's going to be a stable force at guard for them from the Tennessee Titans. Now, Josh Klein, don't get me wrong, not a Pro Bowler, not an All-Pro, but I think he is an upgrade over Mike Ramirez. Then you look at Garrett Bradbury, who they drafted in the first round, who, if he can bring like a Travis Frederick for the Cowboys sort of impact in the 2019 season and open up the running game and help the pass protection and stabilize the interior of this offensive line, we're talking about huge strides being taken in the interior of this offensive line with Klein and Bradbury. Elflein now moves from center to the left guard position, meaning that this is 3 new starters in the interior of the offensive line. And Brian O'Neill at tackle. I'm very fascinated to see how his development is going forward, because if he can take a step going in the right direction, this is another young offensive lineman on the Vikings offensive line that can impact this team huge. A lot of questions on the offensive line, but a lot of hope. It's a young unit, but it's also a promising one. It's a lot different from last year, which makes you believe that it can be a lot better. Now, not only do I believe the players are different, but let's take a look at what else is different. The scheme is different. John DeFilippo, he wasn't the answer in the 2018 season. He was fired halfway through. Kevin Stefanski, new offensive coordinator. And I do believe that the Vikings do have like this true actual direction with their offense. And the direction is a West Coast, Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan sort of scheme. Because you look at who is the offensive assistant. It's Gary Kubiak. Gary Kubiak, of course, played under Mike Shanahan, coached for the Broncos in 2015, coached with the Texans, and we remember how those offenses were. Of course, coaching alongside some of that time with Kyle Shanahan as well, Gary Kubiak. This is going to be a heavy rushing attack. We saw that from Stefanski later in last season in 2018, where Dalvin Cook was more relied upon. They were handing the ball off a little bit more use of the screen game, a little bit more easier passes in terms of Kirk Cousins getting rid of the ball quicker because of the offensive line, a little bit more play action. And I think this is overall going to help the offensive line establish a tone, set the tone in the running game, which just helps the confidence of an offensive line overall. And I think this scheme is going to be better built in 2019. You then look at Rick Dennison, who's the new offensive line coach and run game coordinator, and he is going to as well bring that impact because he has a very close connection with Gary Kubiak. They've worked together before. They have similar goals. They have similar pieces and plans in place that makes me believe that this offense is going to be better coordinated from a scheme perspective and going to be a little bit more fluid, a little bit more well understood of the direction that they're taking this offense with these players. And that also helps the players understand what type of scheme, what they're doing on a weekly basis, and why they are doing it, which helps more than you think. Tony Sparano, of course, passed away before last season. That is something that can't be overlooked from the Vikings' perspective. He was their offensive line coach and one of the best in football, and without him, the Vikings really struggled. So with Rick Dennison coming in there, along with Gary Kubiak, I think this is going to be a lot better offensive line, a lot better scheme-wise, and the Vikings should really be able to take advantage. Now, taking a look at some of the weapons that are on the Vikings, of course we know that they have Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, but the true question about 2018 was who was their third or fourth target in the passing game. Obviously, Dalvin Cook will help in this regard if he stays healthy, which is a true key. Kyle Rudolph is re-signed and happy, so he should have a good season this season. And he's not really relied upon as a big-time tight end, but he's a solid tight end. And then they add in the draft Irv Smith Jr., which I think is going to just give them some flexibility in terms of formation variation, adding 2 tight end sets to the offense, adding another playmaker that's a little bit more of a move tight end who's a little bit more athletic. So Irv Smith Jr., Kyle Rudolph, this is going to be a dynamic duo at tight end along with those 2 receivers. Now, I'm a little bit concerned about their third receiver spot. I don't know who's going to step up there, but they do, if they're going to be this team that gets back to the playoffs, they do need to get something out of that third target in the passing game for Kirk Cousins. Now let's talk about the man Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins last season didn't make the playoffs for the Vikings, but let's understand this. All 6 of the highest paid quarterbacks in football last year didn't make the playoffs. They all missed the playoffs, and there's a reason behind that. When you put too much money behind a quarterback, the rest of the team struggles. And for the Vikings, they need to get good production out of Kirk Cousins once again this season. 30 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. You can't really blame him. That's 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. That's pretty darn good. 4,200 yards. On the surface, very good. Completion percentage, very good. He played very well in some of these losses that they sustained. The tie against Green Bay, he was the best player on the field, including Aaron Rodgers. The loss against the Rams, he was very good in that game. And the loss against the Saints, very good in that game. All 3 of these games actually have something in common, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this video. Kirk Cousins actually ranked 2nd in completion percentage off of play action, which makes me believe that because Gary Kubiak is there, because Dennison is there, they're going to use a lot of play action off of their running game, which I said is going to be a lot bigger focus in their offense. I also think just running the ball more is going to help Kirk Cousins not put so much pressure on him. Now let's get to the defense, which is what I wanted to touch on in the first place, because the defense did have huge regression that went overlooked in last season overall. Not a lot of people talked about how much worse the Vikings were despite not losing a lot of talent in the offseason in 2018. It seemed like in certain games they got sliced apart. Their scheme really got sliced apart, and I think that Zimmer has something to prove this season in terms of his scheme holding up in the NFL. Yes, they still finished ninth in points, fourth in yards as a defense. They're not terrible as a unit in 2018, but they definitely took a huge step down from what they were as the first place or second best defense in the 2017 season, which in the first place allowed them to carry their team to the NFC Championship. Their pass rush in general was a lot worse. They need to get better out of Everson Griffin, and they need somebody as a depth rotationary guy step up. They need that. Hunter is good. Joseph is good. Hunter's great even, but they need somebody else to step up and help in the depth department to not make these guys play so many snaps, which ends up wearing them out as the season wears on. Then you look at the secondary, and my big question is, how much and what are we going to get out of Xavier Rhodes? Because he was Rhodes closed in 2017, but he was Rhodes open in 2018. He was very bad in 2018. He was probably arguably the most overrated corner in the entire league last year. We need better. If you're the Vikings, you're a Vikings fan, you need better out of Xavier Rhodes. You need him to be a shutdown corner for you guys to get back to the playoffs. You need him to be able to take away number one options. And if he does, your defense will immediately jump back into the elite in the NFL. One guy that I am very intrigued by is Mike Hughes. They drafted him in the first round last season at the corner spot. If he can stay healthy and be able to play a little bit, I think he would instantly upgrade their slot corner position. He's a pretty good man-to-man guy. Super intrigued to see what he does this year. Overall, the Vikings, as I said, they have talent on offense. They have talent on defense. I think it's just up to them putting it together and just performing better. Their coaching needs to be better this year. And if they can even fix those flaws they had in 2018, just by a little bit, just marginally better, they can get back to the playoffs. It's a very difficult division, but I do see the Vikings as an X-Factor team in 2019. I can see the Vikings going to the Super Bowl, but I can also see the Vikings missing the playoffs completely. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of the Vikings going the 2019 season. Which side do you lean towards? Do you think they're going to be great, or do you think they're going to disappoint? It's Mitch of the Bottom Line View. Thanks for watching. See you next video. Peace out.